Hello, this is Professor Jay Brown, and this is going to be our third tutorial for new users to InDesign. And this time we're going to be working with text and typography. So first we're going to, again, open up a new document. Hopefully everyone has gotten used to this part already. And I have my preview off, which I tend to do. I don't tend to turn the preview on for creating files because I just know what I want it to look like. So hopefully you guys have gotten used to creating your documents by now. And hit OK, and here's our letter size document. This time we're going to be using the T tool or the type tool. And again, you just select it. And let's say I want to have a headline with some text. So again, if obviously you guys have been looking at layouts and different things throughout the semester, and whether or not you're working with advertising or with editorial, you have headlines, you have copy, you have taglines, you have all these, text is a major component of anything that you're going to be doing. So we're going to work with sort of a basic kind of, here's a headline, here's some text on your page. All right. So we've drawn our shape. Now you have a text box when you have this blinking cursor. So if you don't have the blinking cursor, then that means you drew something other than a text box. I'm just going to type, this is a headline. And again, using text in InDesign is very similar to using it in Word or other programs. So some of this should be feel fairly similar to you. So if you need to edit text, you would do it the same way you would anything else. You would highlight it. In your control panel, the first item is the font. InDesign defaults to Minion Pro, defaults to 12 points. So you can either, select the point size from there. You can type in a point size that you want, so on and so forth. So there's our headline. So if you noticed, when I made my headline too big, when I made it to 72, the word headline disappeared. And sometimes people don't pay attention to what they're writing and they may not notice these things right away. But when you see this red square with the little plus sign through it, InDesign is telling you that there's more copy in this text box than what is visible to you. So that's a key for you to make that adjustment so that you can make your page look the way you intended. I want headline to fit on one line. So this is 2 decks. So in my editorial design classes, we talk about the number of decks in a headline. So this would be 2, 1, 2. I just want this to be 1, so I can, click this until it fits, or I can manually type in a headline point size, whatever works. Now, it's important when you are creating text for your layouts that you have a good vocabulary. You don't want to just adjust the point size because words don't fit. You may need to change the words. So if you're tasked by the client or by your editor, this headline needs to be 56 points and it needs to say what I want it to say. You can't, I'll just make this headline 40 points and make it say what they need to say. So you have to be able to, because now the headline is not so prominent, it's not so striking. So you have to be able to write your own headlines. So this is my headline. When you are working with text boxes or any other boxes in InDesign, you can, if I double click the center handle, it will automatically close up to fit the space of the content that is in there. So that's my 1 deck headline. If I want to have body copy, I'm going to draw another text box. So again, this is a 2-column text box. I am always staying on my grid, and there's my blinking cursor. If you don't have the copy yet, if maybe it's still with the clients, if maybe you haven't finished writing the story or you're not sure, you can work with dummy text in InDesign. So you can go under type to fill with placeholder text, and it will give you dummy text. I tend to instruct students to use a serif font when they're working with body copy. I'm sure there's many designers who would argue that point. but I tend to use a serif font that's between 9 and 11 points. I'm just going to make this 11. 9 and 11, 9 to 11 points is sort of what your average person can read over long lines of copy. So that's what we're going to do. There's a site that a lot of designers use to also grab dummy text, Lorem Ipsum. So you can go there and grab dummy type if you want. It's better because it's actual text, and that can make things a little bit easier to work with. So if you wanted to copy text from there and put that in your text box, that is fine as well. And then you can just keep pasting it so it fits better. So when you're working with text, and remember the W lets me turn off the guides, it's really important to make sure you have your indents and your spacing and all that good stuff taken care of. So of course, if this were a news story, this would be in column form. So in your control panel, this is your column area, number of columns. You can see it says it there. And I want to, because I'm on a 2-column grid. So there we have our 2 columns. Again, there's more text here. I can open this up until it fits, until it works. If I want to have indents, you want to let InDesign do the work for you. You don't want to manually do things. So I don't want to manually hit return and then hit the space bar. That is a no-no. I don't want to ever see anyone doing that. So if I highlight all of this, so again, Command A, we talked about Command A in previous tutorials. And I go up here in my control panel. So we're starting to use the control panel more and more as we get through these tutorials. This bottom left one is first line indent. So you see it says it there. So we're going to default to 1 pica for our editorial body copy, if that's what we're doing. And you see it gave me a 1 pica indent. So whenever I hit return, it will always give me 1 picas on my indents, which is much better than trying to do it manually. So always remember to put in that detail when you are putting together your headlines and your body copy. So that's our basic generic. Here's a headline, here's some text. Now, a lot of stories have subheads. So again, my students will hear me say, where's your subhead? Where's your subhead? This is my subhead. So you always want to make sure that you have those as well. I tend to argue that a good subhead size is between, the high teens, low to mid 20s. Again, we address this with your style sheets. So you want to apply the lessons that we've been doing with the style sheets to your actual layouts. If I can spell sheets, which apparently I can't. There we go. So keep that in mind. We talked about headline point sizes. 56, that's, in my opinion, getting a little small, but again, it depends on what your audience is, what you've decided for your layout, so on and so forth. Now, spacing. Our textbook talks about spacing, and if you find yourself in trouble with spacing between your text, a little trick I like to use is to draw 2 squares. So again, we've done our shape tutorial. So I'm going to draw 2. One is going to be 1 pica by 1 pica. And it's important that these don't have strokes on them, because the strokes will make the shape a little bit smaller or a little bit bigger. So you can see I took the stroke off and I lost 1 point on my size of the box. So make sure you have that stroke off first, and then fill it with a color. Oops, not the stroke color, the fill color. And then I'm going to duplicate this or copy. So copy paste. Now that. Copy and paste this shape. So edit copy, edit paste. This is the last time I do it in the menu. From now on, I'll do it on my keyboard. And then this one will be 2 picas. So when you have maybe a feature or something a little bit more special and you want a little bit more space, you can use the 2 pica by 2 pica one. So this helps you give yourself space in between items. So if you put it right up against the different shapes, this will help you with your spacing. Always be wary of your descenders like Y's, Q's, P's, and your ascenders, H's, L, because that will adjust any issues you have with spacing. So if you stick with your X height letters, that will help you. So remember, the shapes can be a little deceiving. So you always want to make sure you're bumping up against the actual text when you're using the spacers. And this will also ensure that you have equal spacing against each item. So I want to move both my subhead and my body copy down. So I'm going to grab the subhead, hold down the shift key, grab the body copy shape, and then move them both down. So that way these two were already set, so I don't want to have to move those over and over again. So that way I moved them together. And that is how I adjusted my spacing. So now we have some pretty good spacing in between these items. You also want to make sure that your text is aligned the way you intend. So right now we are ragged right or aligned left. If you're working with editorial content, you typically want to be justified unless you're doing a opinion piece or a feature story, then you can be aligned left. If you're working with advertising, public relations, those are obviously have a little bit more freedom with how you're working with the typography. Just pay attention to consistency on how you are aligning your text. You know, for some reason you want something to be centered or, you know, whatever it is that you're doing, just make sure you're paying attention to that part of your layout. If you want to adjust the leading, kerning, tracking of your layouts, that's something else you want to pay attention to, which you also can do in your control panel. So the leading is the space between lines. So again, I'm going to move this down and I'm going to type more here. So right now I have too much space in between the first line and the second line of my headline. So I'm going to highlight both lines and go into my leading here in the control panel. It's right underneath the point size. And I'm going to adjust. So again, always make sure you pay attention to your descenders and ascenders when you do this. And as you design more, you'll get more sophisticated with how you can visualize the leading, the tracking, and the kerning. The kerning and the tracking, the space between individual letters and the space between words, you also want to make sure you pay attention to that. So here, there's not enough space between the T and the H, so I'm just going to highlight the T and the H. And then here I have the tracking in the control panel, so I can click it a few times and it spaced it out a little bit too much. So again, I can either put numbers in manually. It's doing it by tens here, so if I want to do it a little bit less, maybe I can put in 15. So you can keep that in mind as you are working with your tracking and leading. And so you see it adjusted the entire word, so I lost some space there. So this is where a lot of back and forth you might have to use when you are working with these different things. So just be aware of those things. And sometimes I cheat and just make a whole new text box, and you know, but that's probably not a good thing to tell you, but I have done that before. So those are some of your basics with working with putting a headline, putting a subhead, and other text on your page. You can also change the color of text the way we learned in our shape lesson. Again, you just highlight it and you pick the color from your, ooh, that does not look good. I'm not a fan of stroke on text, just FYI, but you can change the colors that way. And that is how you work with text in InDesign.